No, don't tell us to go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
All right, everybody. Hey, welcome to Advanced DNS, or, it's not DNS.
It was DNS.
It was DNS.
It was DNS.
So we had a previous webcast, and by we, it was Brig and Lex.
Yep.
Yeah, Brig and Lex a few months ago on kind of, common DNS problems. This is not just a rehash of that. We're going to go a little deeper, particularly in the multi-domain issues. But we'll touch on a few of these.
Yeah.
Touch on a few of them, but we do recommend that you go back and watch that other webcast, especially if we're covering subjects that you're like, I don't understand that. It's kind of a prerequisite that you've watched that or at least have a basic understanding of DNS.
Brig, I love your shirt.
Ah, thanks. I do too. And there are timestamps on that webcast as well, so that's really good.
Yeah, the timestamp meaning you can just basically look at the different subjects that were covered and just jump directly to that part of the video.
Yep.
Well, let's go ahead and rock and roll.
All right.
Go ahead and set the scene there, Brig. You're driving.
All right. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of like an overview of just DNS and ownership and really where like the most important setting that you can do in an organization that's using DHCP and DNS. And then we're just going to go through like a multi-domain registration and then the DNS update proxy group and show you kind of like what that's going to do. Cool. So as you can see, I have a domain controller up here, and the one thing that we're going to do, the very first thing is talk about DNS record ownership. And we covered this in the other webcast as well, but it's worth reiterating again. In most organizations with the default DHCP and DNS setup, the client, the actual workstation, owns those records and is responsible for updating those with the DNS server. So the DNS server doesn't own them, the DHCP server doesn't own them. What we want to do is we want to change that so the DHCP server does own those, does register those, and deregister them as it gets the lease or as it releases the lease.
All right, and you mentioned we've got a domain controller up here. Should call out that obviously we have this installed on a domain controller.
Yep.
There are some organizations that don't.
Yeah.
Appropriately, this is the DNS. This is a DNS server.
Yeah.
It happens to be our DC.
Yeah. So DC, it's and our DHCP server as well. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we just right click, scope. Oh. Once we expand that, it always gets me. Mm-hmm. Properties, DNS, and these are the settings. This is the default settings that you want to change. Always dynamically update DNS records and discard AMPTR records.
I think that those settings right there will solve a lot of problems.
Yes. So what that essentially does, this is like the most important setting, because what it does is it takes away the client's rights to own those the DNS entries and makes that the responsibility of the DHCP server. So that's really what you want to do on that one. So and this comes into play later on especially when we're dealing with the DNS update proxy. So
really, what's an example of, or what's a tell for somebody who, especially using inventory or PDQ deploy, to see that there's a DNS issue? What are some error messages that they might see? Some common ones.
Computer name mismatch, computer name not found. Those are the two most common ones.
Okay.
The most common is computer name mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's
computer name mismatch. It's where we try to access the computer Homer. Yep. And DNS says, hey, Homer resolves to this IP address, which actually is a record for Marge, the computer Marge. It's basically, we're saying, well, we thought we were hitting Homer, but this came back as Marge. So. And
it's a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot that now. We used to use the MBT stat -A and then the IP address of a machine to be able to get the information back on which machine that was. But because of security concerns, Microsoft released a patch, I think it was August of 2016, so a year ago, that prevented NetBIOS translation across subnets. So it
significantly hampered your ability to troubleshoot.
Exactly. So what I typically recommend is you actually physically log into the machine or contact that user and get an IP config and get that IP address, and then go ahead and correct your DNS on that one. But you may not have to, because this should solve.
Well, what we're doing here should resolve most of those issues.
Yep. All right. So now that you've set this, that's like the most important thing. And you can also, we have two settings in deploy and in inventory. So in deploy, we have this performance tab in options preferences, and this down here, test multiple addresses and name resolution. This will test multiple addresses. So you've got Homer, and you've got Homer, and you've got Homer. One's a 10 dot, one's a 192 dot, one's a 172.16 dot. Those, it will test each one of those, and it pings each one, doesn't it?
Yeah, what happened, before we had this, if you do not have this checked, what happens when you say deploy or scan Homer, we'll go out to DNS, say, where's Homer? The first record that comes back we will try to contact it. If it does not return and this is unchecked, then we say, okay, that computer's offline. You check this if your DNS isn't as clean as it should be and you might have multiple records. That way we hit that first record. If it doesn't return and there's multiple records, we'll keep going until either the computer returns or we've exhausted all the records. Once one of those records returns, though, we no longer traverse. Yeah. So this is good, especially if you don't have control of your DNS environment. We know some of you just don't. You have to do a mother may I to headquarters to make changes. Especially for those of you who have laptops or computers that move from subnet to subnet, might have different records. That's a good thing. This is a good setting to have.
Yep. Now, same place in preferences, options preferences, and then under network settings for inventory. So again, it's right there. So we've got it in both because we should.
Okay.
Now, ideally, you should never have to use this. But
Ideally.
it's there. Yeah, it's there for those instances where you have to. But if the DNS is set up properly, you should never have to use this. All right. So one more thing about wired and wireless, and Josh and I were talking about this earlier.
By the way, everybody, we have Josh on phone a friend. How's it going, Josh?
Good. How are you guys doing today?
Great. And Josh is actually really, really good with his DNS.
Yeah.
And so please pipe up, young man.
Yes.
That I will.
So the one thing that we're talking about, wired.
He says that while sweating profusely, quivering lip.
Absolutely. Just trying to channel like a dairy cow over here. We'll see what happens.
We want the eye of the tiger, not the stare of the dairy cow. Come on, focus, young man.
I will not laugh hysterically. All right. Wired wireless. So one of the things that we're talking about is if you've got like a wireless network and that's acting as a DHCP server, either put that in bridge mode or do a DHCP relay on that so that you can relay from your Windows DHCP server, or if you're using a secondary DHCP server, and be able to relay that through your wireless devices or even your VPN devices. And you kind of had a solution to that as well, like for organizations. I was always like, just put it in your budget.
Well, you can go real cheap if you need to with like a Raspberry Pi, and you can run DHCPD on that and then relay off of that if you really can't afford a device that can do DHCP relay.
So $30.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Raspberry Pi, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and move on into back to our DNS
Okay,
console.
so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to show you how to do zone transfers between one domain and another domain. And this will work like if you have a forest and then you have child domains, or in this case, we're using two discrete domains. There's no connectivity, no trust, nothing. They are just they're on separate networks entirely. But we're able to route to those networks, and that's the most important part, is that you can route to them. But what I want to do is I want to actually transfer a zone from the AA Labs.
From one discrete to the other one.
Yep. So I want to go from AA Labs, and I want to transfer that zone, this zone file here, and I want to transfer that over to my other DC, which is in PDQ Labs.
Okay.
So that I can resolve those names while I'm in PDQ Labs. So,
Should you delete one of these to show the transfer?
oh, I've already deleted the AA Labs.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay.
What I'm going to do is transfer this one. First thing that you need to do is go to Properties, go to Zone Transfers, Allow Transfers,
Okay.
and then you need to Notify. So now I'm going to notify. This is the partner name server on the other network or on the other domain. I'm going to automatically notify so that any changes that are made, and it does this for those of you that are familiar with Bind. It does it based on serial numbers. Same thing applies here.
Okay. So what IP address are they putting here? The remote?
Yeah, the remote DNS server.
Okay.
And that can be a DC. In this case, it's a DC, but it could also be just a. All right. So
Is that 50?
that's 40.
It's 40? Okay.
All right.
All right, so we want to notify or transfer the AA Labs, all those records, over to this other discrete
Yes.
domain. It's not a child domain. We do know a lot of you have domains like this.
Yep. So what we've done is we're allowing the zone transfer, and then we're allowing the notify, which happens really fast.
Okay, so you hit apply.
Apply OK, and then we go over to this one, and we actually have to add the zone. New zone. It's going to be a secondary zone, obviously not a primary zone because it's not the holder of that record. It automatically removes your ability to make that an AD integrated zone. Send that over. We're going to call this, let's see, this is AA Labs. And this is going to be the DNS server that we're actually taking the zone file from.
So we've entered the other one entered this DNS server. Now this one's entering the other DNS server. Perfect.
And we finish, and there we go.
There's AA Labs.
There is
right
AA
there. That
Labs.
was a very fast transfer.
Yep. And now what you can do here, so now we're actually back in AA Labs. I'm just going to create a new A record. And we're just going to call it Not Reels.
Okay.
We're going to give it a fake IP.
So basically, what are you just trying to show how fast the records?
Yeah, the notify. Yep. Okay, so Not Reels is there, down here. And we go back over to PDQ, and we do a little refresh. And Not Reels is there.
There you go.
So there you
That
go.
was fast.
It's fast. So now there's one other part of this process that needs to take place, because right now, if I try and resolve any of these names, I have to use the FQDN for
And
this.
let's
separate
keep it
domain.
on that station because we had some questions queued up.
Okay.
I'm gonna throw just a brick right into those.
Okay.
Those finely tuned gears. What's the question we got?
Yes.
Dear Shane and Brig, what do you recommend for environments with mobile devices that can have one of three connections, Wi-Fi, LAN, VPN? What is the cleanest way using DNS to ensure they can be accessed via remote tools, RDP, remote assistance, PDQ? If the connection is anything other than wired, we can't connect to the mobile device. Sincerely, Jorlando D.
Hey, Orlando. Well, number one, if you say you can't connect, there's two parts there. Can you resolve? Does it see that does it try to get to the correct IP address based off of that connection? Obviously, if not, you need to. We're talking DNS, and some of these things here, maybe you're not doing your zone transfers properly. But if you can resolve but not connect, then you're talking in PDQ land where you need to have those. You need to have those ports open for file and print sharing. Oftentimes, people have their VPN, any connections coming in from the VPN, they don't allow file and print sharing. If you want to manage from the PDQ products right now, you need to have that. So when you say connect, you might want to do a follow-up with us. Do you mean resolve, or do you mean I resolve it, but I just can't connect? We need to know that one. But do you want to throw something in there? Let's assume that he can't resolve, because it's going to one of those other records. It's going. He's wireless, but it's going to the VPN record, or he's VPN and it's going to the wired.
DHCP relay, what we were talking about earlier. So you want to do DHCP relay on that. Either that, or I mean, you can. There are ways that you could do it so that they don't register in DNS, or that they do register in DNS based on the adapter. But yeah, you want to use DHCP relay on that, and then set those settings that we set before for the DNS that always registers. That's really going to be your best solution.
We're going to cover DHCP relay a little bit in a little bit. Okay.
Yep.
Stay tuned on that, Orlando.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
follow up on us once again if it's a resolution issue for sure, or if you resolve perfectly, is just you can't connect. Big difference.
Yeah, the gap. All right, so now DNS resolution. One last thing that we need to do is our GPO. So we're going to go back here. The GPO that we need to do in order to eliminate the need to do FQDN searches and all of that stuff, and there's a caveat with this, which we'll go into in a second, is do a DNS suffix search list, which is basically just under computer configuration, policies, administrative templates, and the DNS suffixes.
This is really important
Yes.
for multi-domain environments, even domains in the same forest.
Yep.
And definitely discrete domains. The DNS suffix search list and the search order, impressively important.
Yeah, and it is an amazingly easy GPO to set, and it works all the time. So very easy to do.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Now there is, Josh wanted me to call this out, that there is a DHCP option called 119 that will do the same thing. It is a terrible, awful, horrible thing because it has to
Please
be...
show it. Let's pull it really quick.
Okay.
Is there any chance you can pull? So this is a question that I myself have had, and that is, I know to set the DNS suffixes via GPO, but I use DHCP. There is an option, it's 119, where you can set the DNS suffix searches in the search order. Which one do you use?
Yes.
Josh, what do you have to say?
Well, it depends on if you're a truly homogeneous Windows environment or if you've got a mix of some Linux workstations in there. If you've got some Linux workstations, your GPOs aren't going to apply. So DHCP option 119 can give this out. A thing to note is that option 119 will not apply to Windows clients.
No. There is no... Yeah, the Windows clients do not request 119 at all when they make a DHCP request.
When did that? Do you know what OS that started in?
I believe it started in Windows 7 where it stopped, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
So it maybe the older clients, maybe if you still unfortunately have some of those older clients. But okay, so homogeneous, you have a Windows DHCP server, but you've got a Linux or some Mac clients. Non-Windows clients, obviously they're not going to get the GPO, that DNS suffix search order. This is what he's looking at right here.
Yes. So once you've created this actual option that doesn't previously exist in the list, it's an array, and when you're putting this in, you have to put in the hex value for each letter of the array, including spaces, dots, everything, which you can get. You can get it online. You can do a little hex, and you can find out which one. So like 0x67, I think is like or something like that.
Or you can use the calc scientific.
Yeah, add, and you just add these all in, and then that's your array. You think there would be a string, but it's not. So anyway, this is not a fun setting at all. There's nothing fun about option 119, but it is available should you need to do a suffix search or pass that out to non-Windows clients.
But since we're really talking about Windows clients here for the most part, use the group policy.
Yeah, because it's very fast, very quick. All right, okay, and then once we've done that, then we're able to go ahead and resolve that. The one caveat that I was going to mention before is that if you have two discrete domains and they have machines with the same names, it's going to only resolve one. It's going to resolve whichever one is closest.
Whatever one is first in the search order. So if you have homer.pdq labs and homer.aa labs, PDQ labs is first, it will try to resolve the first one. So once again, your search order, your suffix search order is also very important. Do we have another question?
Dear Shane and Brig, I have an issue here. One of my workstations running on Windows 7 Pro Service Pack 1 keeps going missing in the forward lookup zones. Even after I manually created the A record, it disappeared again after a while. It only resolved when provided a static IP. Why does this happen, and how can I resolve it if I want to use a DHCP IP? Thanks in advance, Jeffrey O.
Do you want to take that one?
Sure.
Go for it.
Okay, first thing, since this is probably only happening to one workstation and not many workstations, I'm assuming that you probably have scavenging, which is why it disappears over a period of time. So that's probably set. Since it's only one workstation, the problem is actually, or most likely, on that workstation itself. I would check Event Viewer and check for DNS client. You can do a filter search and check for anything in DNS client system or in the system log. Check that. You can also do a resetting of the network, and Josh, you have some ideas about that as well, I believe.
I do. I mean, my option is the full nuclear option, but it'll work.
It'll work.
On that machine, if you run netsh winsock reset and netsh int IP reset, you're going to force a complete reload of the Windows networking stack. That hopefully will fix it.
All right.
Yeah, it basically resets the entire TCP stack entirely, and then a reboot is required after you run those commands. You just run one and then just run the other.
Thank you for that. If we need to, if people need that, we can make sure that that's in the bonus content, those commands. Josh, I'll get with Kelly afterwards if you don't mind on that. Is it worth noting, should we open up the properties for Nick to see if, is there anything that you want to show that they should have set at the Nick level? Just wondering, I'm just throwing this out there, like, notify or anything like that, that might be a problem, because I know some of these problems are the way, some people are like, this workstation is not working, only to find that there's actually a static DNS server that's old, that's been listed in those properties.
You can check like the network properties on that.
May I?
Yes, absolutely.
I've always just liked the shortcut ncpa.cpl, the network control panel. Just goes right where you need it to go. Go to the properties there. I'll let you drive now. So sometimes you'll see, go ahead and circle that. Sometimes I have seen this before where
Which one?
Just the DNS, where it's an IP, it's getting the DHCP address, but there's an old DNS server listed in there.
Well, yeah, because you can set this statically. Even though you're getting a DHCP address, you can set this to what you want. And then if you click on advanced, then there could be a long list of things here. You can also have, as you can see here, we have
and those are grayed out because those are applied via group policy. But you could sometimes some people have those overwritten. You know what I mean? It's just check check. Sometimes you have to check your local client, especially if the user has administrative rights or this client's been around for a while. Most of you, I would dare say, most of you who handle DNS inherited the environment from somebody else.
Yep.
And it's been there for years. So there's a good chance that there's just some sweeping up at the attic that you need to do.
Yeah. In fact, it's definitely the majority of people inherit DNS.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Is there another question?
Yes.
Dear Shane and Brig, are reverse lookup zones necessary? In some networks, they are not set up, like in my schools that I have inherited. Sincerely, Tim G.
Yeah, another inheriting somebody else's work.
Exactly.
Okay, so the answer on are they necessary largely depends on obviously what you're intending to do. I like reverse lookup, definitely. It is not required.
Nope.
But it can come back. It can come back to haunt you.
Yes.
Do you want to give us some examples, or Josh, if you want to pipe in?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a use case where you wouldn't want a reverse lookup, and I'm coming up with a blank.
I mean, reverse lookups, they're not strictly necessary. You can have a network without reverse lookups for years. And its default, out of the box, Windows DNS does not set up a reverse lookup zone. You actually have to set that up. So it will work. But are they necessary? Yes. They're necessary for best practices simply because that's the way DNS works. Why the default is to not include,
not have it,
to not have it, I don't know.
And a lot of people, this is just like with scavenging, a lot of people inherit or they can't change it, and not only are there no reverse lookup, there's also no scavenging, or the scavenging is set very, very leniently.
Yes.
and not aggressive enough.
Yeah, when you're seeing a DNS record in DNS that's 5-6 years old, that's that's not good.
Okay.
That's a timestamp.
If you can, Tim, go ahead and add, if it was within the rights that you have, just add those reverse lookups.
Yep.
You won't be upset.
Yeah, and there's a little trick I just want to show you.
Okay, go,
because of
please.
this.
This is great.
So one of the things about this, if you go to View and then click on Advanced, this is not the default view. Advanced is not normally turned on. And then if you right-click a property, if you uncheck this or check this, it applies to all of the records.
Yeah, not just that one.
Not just that record. So what you want to do is create your zone.
Let's go back there and show them what that option is. This is the update associated PTR. So we're talking about reverse lookups.
Yep.
Definitely, you check that. Once again, as Briggs said, this works for all of the records, not just the record that you're using.
Yes. So once I've checked that, so I've created my zone. I go into a record. I have the advanced view. I apply that. Now every record that I go into has that update associated PTR record. So now we'll automatically update that reverse record. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice that it uses an interesting notation, and there's a long-winded reason that we'll not get into as to what it does. But I would say set this up. It's just a best practice. So it is kind of, in my viewpoint, it is absolutely essential and necessary for a network to be able to have PTR records. And you can actually do zone transfers on those too. So
guess what, Tim? You have a homework assignment, young man.
Yep. But it's pretty basic. All right. Do we want to take another question, or do we want to go into DNS update proxy?
All right.
Okay.
Dearest Shane and Brig, do you recommend enabling or disabling by default DHCP Name Protection? Sincerely, Matthew R.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. So now we're going to start singing Meatloaf here.
Thanks, Matt. No, we're not. Are we?
It must have been while you were kissing me. Yes, you took the words right out of Briggs' mouth whilst I was kissing him. Brig has very strong feelings about DHCP name protection.
Yes. If you are a single Windows environment, you do not need name protection. If, however, you are in a mixed mode environment where you've got Linux boxes, BSD boxes, Macs, printers that have weird names that you would not normally name a printer,
and that use DHCP.
Yeah, and they use DHCP. Then yes, you would use name protection, because basically it just prevents name squatting from non-Windows machines. Windows is smart enough to know, oh, okay, so you're a Windows machine, and I'm gonna
Well, yeah, try adding on the same domain two computers of the same name, and you're gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
Gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, just like the same IP address.
Going into South Park now. Meatloaf to South Park.
Yes.
Wide ranging.
So and we're gonna get. That's basically it. So I don't recommend it if you're a Windows-centric environment. If you've got mixed machines or you're going to have mixed machines, then yes, I do recommend using name protection on that.
All right.
Right, should we talk about DNS Update Proxy?
Yes, please.
Okay, so DNS Update Proxy is built into Active Directory starting in Windows 2003, and which is still not supported. So 2008, 2012, 2016, DNS Update Proxy is a group that's a built-in group in Active Directory that allows you to put all of your DHCP
I
servers
have to
into.
interrupt you.
Yes.
You threw as part of a quip the still not supported. No, the proxy update is supported.
Yes.
2003 is not supported
No.
by Microsoft. So I just had to throw that out
Yes,
there.
yes,
Don't think that
just
he's
to
just saying that
clarify.
this update proxy is not supported.
Oh no, because of course it is supported. But yeah, okay. Anyway, so getting back to the DNS Update Proxy. Sorry,
I know.
thought. That's okay. That's all right.
Yes.
You succeeded. I lose the bet. All right. There are a couple of use cases for this. If you've got multiple DHCP servers, which you should have, because you should have a primary and a failover or a load balancer. So, and Shane and I were talking about this the other day about like, okay, so you've got like an MPLS network between like Chicago and New York, and so you've got a DHCP server in each so that they do load balancing, because clearly you don't want to have one DHCP server on one side.
Servicing
Yeah.
DHCP requests across the continent.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're going to have that load balancing so that the local site gets everything they need to. The problem with those settings that we set way back at the very beginning of this about always register to the DNS-A and PTR records is that DHCP server owns that record, which means that if that DHCP server goes offline and the other one takes over, either in a failover or in a load balancing situation, it will not be able to update those records. 'cause
It's
it doesn't-
effectively read-only.
Yeah, it doesn't own those records. So the DNS Update Proxy group says like, okay, all of the DHCP servers that you have, whether it's a cluster, because even in a clustered environment.
Let's show us. Let's just drive it. Let's drive
Okay,
it real
let's
quick
do
to
it.
show them so they can
All
see.
right. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to just go into a DUC, Active Directory's users' computers, and we'll go to the DNS Proxy group, and we've lost it. There it is. And the members here. So we've got two memberships. We've got, because we're using the DC as a DHCP server and the secondary DC as a DHCP server, we are putting both of those in there. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet. The only objects that should ever be a member of this group are the DHCP servers. That's it. No users, nothing.
So
Just
the
those
computer
DHCP
object.
servers.
And remember,
Yep.
by default, when you go to add a member to a security group, computer objects are not included as a possible member. It's usually, groups. I don't know why they do this, but I mean, I can see why. I can kind of see why. But you're going to have to actually go
Safety.
in there and check the computers,
Yep.
so that computer objects can become members. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to find them. I know the name of that, but yes, and it always gets me, and I still do it even after years and years. I still forget that I have to set that.
So no users are needed here, just the DHCP
Yep.
server computer objects.
That's it. So now we've got two DHCP servers. One serving as a failover, so that's how we set that up. And then we're going to actually secure this here, and we run this simple command.
I don't know if you can zoom in any more than that, but that's as far.
All right. It's basically just a DNS command, and it's configure, and then it's just an open ACL on the property. And this secures it. And this is very important when you're doing this on a DC, because it basically says like the only object that has the authority to make any sort of changes are members of this ACL, which is the DNS proxy group and the DNS and the user that we're going to put into.
So only
DHCP.
those. That's why you only have your DHCP computers as members of that group, because
Yep.
those are the only members that can modify this.
Yep. And then you're going to have a user that does this, and we'll get into that, and that sets this. So it's pretty basic. We've already done this, but it's very fast, very quick. Nice, easy.
The DNS CMD command with a /config. You can look at the usage statement
Yep.
for DNS command if you'd like.
Yep. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to go into our DHCP server, and there we go, already there.
So now in the DHCP console,
Yep, and then we're going to do name protection. So now we can either do name protection, and we can either do this on the scope level, or we can do this on the server level. So if you've got multiple scopes, you can do it on the IPv4 level, and it'll filter down to all of the scopes. And basically, now that we've set this, and this goes back to the name protection again, just enable that. That's it. Now you notice that it grays out a lot of these options because it's automatically assumed if you've got name protection that the DHCP server is going to own those records. So, and just as kind of a little pin of trivia, this DNS tab here is actually option 81 in DNS. You can't actually set it as an option, but that's what it is. Like in the RFC, this is it. Just a little bit of nerd trivia.
RFC.
All right, so now we've set up name protection. So, and again, it's not going to hurt anything if you set that up, but I would recommend not doing that if you've got a Windows.
If you've only got strictly Windows, maybe especially like a single domain, but if you do have any other mixture of devices in there, then you might want to do name protection.
Yep. All right, so our next step is to create the DNS proxy user. This is just a normal plain Jane user. There's nothing special about this user. It's not an administrator. It's not a member of any group. It's just, I just created it. Make the password very complex because this is how, on that ACL list that we just created, this is how you're going to secure your DHCP server. So we've created that user. We don't make it a member of the DNS proxy
Make
group.
sure the password is set to never expire.
Never expire,
Unless
yes,
you
thank
want
you.
some extra pain down the road in 3 months or whatever you have your password policy set to.
Yep.
Kind of treat this as a service account, but this is a service account that does not need elevated privileges.
No. Yeah, it's just plain Jane, which is exactly what you want. You go back in here, and then we go to Properties, and we go to Advanced, Credentials. And this is where you're securing your DHCP server from your DC. This is where it all comes down to, where this is the user that will update and owns those records and approves that through DHCP. So you just put in the username, the domain, and your very complicated, very long password. Or just at least complicated. And that's pretty much basically it as far as securing that. Cool. And then the last part of all of this is setting up scavenging on DNS. And we're not going to really go into that because we have that
in the previous webcast. You want to hurry and show it?
Sure.
I mean, scavenging, once again, it was mentioned in the first webcast about this subject, is the single greatest yield for fixing DNS problems. The fact of the matter is, the environments that have either no scavenging enabled or the scavenging just runs way too infrequently, you get a lot of stale records, and that is the bane of DNS. Once again, your data is only as good as it is. An inventory only as good as the last scan. DNS, it's only as good as those records. If you have multiple records, you need to purge those. Scavenging is really the way to do it. Set it and forget it.
It is. All right, so we're going to go, if we just right-click on this, go to Properties, we'll see that we don't have any information. Go to Advanced, do the same thing. Now we've got this delete record when it becomes stale. And once again, you check that, apply it. Now.
And that applies for
all of them.
All the records.
Yep. So do that.
That's one way. There's several ways. There's several settings for scavenging here.
Yes.
So there's one.
There's 3 total. There's 2. We set this on the General tab, Aging. Okay, important point here. Your no refresh and your refresh interval should never be shorter than your DHCP release times. So if your release time is 3 days, your refresh and no refresh combined should be no less than 3 days. So we've got, the default is 8 days in DHCP. We've got 9 days set here. You could actually set that to that for 8 days, and that would be fine as well. But that's just very important that you do that. And we go into more detail on the other webcast on that. And we set that there. And then finally, we set it at the server level.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't
Advanced.
remember. Advanced. There it is. All right, and it's going to be here, down at the bottom, enable automatic scavenging of stale records, and your scavenging period is set for 3 days. That means that every 3 days, scavenging will run, just like a cron job on this. So anywhere from, like in this particular setting, it could be, let's see, we did it for 9 days. Well, actually, we did it for 8 days, so it could be 8 days to 11 days is the time that the record could be scavenged.
And don't just copy our values. Once again, it comes down to what's your release time. I know some of you, because of you're inheriting these problems, you inherited not only DNS, but you inherited your subnet masks. You inherited the fact that you have more computers on your subnets than it was originally planned for, and so you have very short release times. The scavenging, your scavenging schedule needs to be needs to take into consideration your release time. It has to be commensurate with that, not with just what you see here.
Yeah, and yes, and with decreased release times does not mean that you should be running scavenging every couple of hours. You should, the minimum I would ever do would be a refresh interval of 2 days, or no refresh interval of 2 days, refresh interval of maybe 1 day, and then a scavenging period of 1 to 3 days. So that's the minimum that I would do.
Okay, let's take another question.
Dear Shane, and Brigg. Is there a way to clean up DNS from machines that have left the network? It seems that when a machine leaves the network, say a laptop at the end of the day, and is gone for a few days, their address is reassigned to another machine. The ones on the network all the time are cleaned up. When their addresses change, however, those off the network get stuck there. This causes name mismatch in PDQ. Thanks in advance, David Allen, F.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, scavenging. You're hello, David Allen. Am I the only one who's thinking of David Allen Coe? Anyway, you're gonna
Greer. But.
Yeah, you're gonna definitely a different spelling and hopefully a different person. Yeah. Anyway, you're gonna want to look at this from scavenging, and you might have on the area where your wireless networks come in, you might not have scavenging enabled over there. Check it out. The fact of the matter is those records are not getting cleaned up as often as they need to.
Yep. In addition to the scavenging, this setting right here, option 81. Seriously, this is if you're using DHCP and you're able, and it's going to those laptops and those clients are using relay or just as a bridge mode, this will resolve all of that because DHCP will own those records. So when that laptop leaves and that lease expires or a new machine gets that lease, it will update DNS. So this is a very
right now when that leaves, obviously DHCP DNS, they don't own those records, and so that computer's offline. Not until it comes back online is that going to get potentially cleaned up.
Yep.
Let those records be owned centrally. I mean, almost everything that we do in our industry has been moving for years and years to central management, from group policy to DHCP. So allow that to be set centrally. Once the ownership is held centrally, then that computer can be offline for an indefinite number of days, and those records will be cleaned up.
Yep. So yeah, the combination of the two is perfect. Great networking.
Sure, go down.
Dear Shane and Brigg, what are some tip-offs in inventory that indicate there's a problem with DNS? Sincerely, Monica K.
Well, we covered a few. The computer name mismatch is definitely a tell.
Yep.
That's not even a tell. That's not a tell. There's no subtlety there. They're saying, hey, there's a mismatch, and that means there's a record. Obviously, the host name not found.
Yep.
Is a big one. Can you think? Those are the two that come to mind. But can you think of anything else?
Computer offline. Actually, we'll see a couple of those. So it'll actually show online, but it'll say computer offline.
Okay.
So I've seen a couple of those.
You know what I've seen that sometimes show up as you'll try to scan or deploy to a target, and you make connection. So okay, sweet, my password, my scan user or my deploy user worked, but then it fails, and it usually says, can't, there's an error with the service manager. That's actually a DNS problem.
Yes.
You've made a connection to that computer, so security is fine, but security fails on the way out, and what I've usually seen is you're connecting to that computer like using the domain /username, and then that computer is trying to resolve to the domain controller, and the domain controller is saying, no, I expect username at domain. I mean, it's weird, but that actually is a DNS issue. That goes down into, you might have to go into your credentials in inventory and deploy, and just make sure you're fairly uniform. You're using and how your domains and usernames are being presented.
Yep.
That's one way to look at it.
I'd forgotten about that one.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. It goes down to people think it's security, but no, that's actually DNS.
Yep. Because why? It's always DNS.
Do we have any more questions, or are we going to wrap it up? No?
Nope.
Dear Shane and Brigg, how can target computer name mismatch and computer name could not be found errors be solved? Thank you, Dietrich K.
Have you been listening to the webcast at all, Kelly?
Okay, Dietrich, we just covered this, but also we covered this in great detail on the other webcast that's in the bonus content.
Yeah.
So.
If you're having those problems, definitely watch that other one. But scavenging is the biggest. I'm telling you, I've talked to customers who are saying, "Oh, once I enabled scavenging, the computer name mismatch errors almost completely went away."
Yeah.
But look at the scavenging. Make sure that those records are owned by the servers and not the clients. Target host name. That's the target host name. Now that's actually where there's not a record.
Yeah.
But the computer is online. People are saying, "Hey, I can see it online." once again, it's a DNS issue. You've got to look at how those computers are getting registered in DNS. Make sure you have to go. He's making the arrow again, highlighting the scope properties.
Yes, set this. Important. Super. Yes.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Diedrich. Hey, you guys, thank you very much.
Yes,
And Brig,
thank you.
thanks. I know this is definitely a pet issue with Brig
Yeah.
and with Josh. Josh, thank you very much, brother. Thanks. Tune in for the next webcast. Do we have a webcast on Tuesday? Or is it just next Thursday?
Not this Tuesday.
Yeah. So tune in next Thursday, and you'll be getting a notice on what that subject will be. Rock on, everybody.
Right.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining the webcast today. I want to congratulate Tim G. and Matthew R., winners of PDQ swag, as well Brian S., winner of our PDQ floppy coaster. Send us your info at webcast@pdq.com. We'll get that good stuff out to you as soon as we can. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.